Today we learned the U.S. is still shedding jobs, but we've found a bright spot on the employment front, a company that plans to add more than 50,000 jobs a year for the next 5 years. That company is Deloitte, and right now we're joined by its CEO, James Quigley. Mr. Quigley, welcome to Bloomberg News. Good to have you on.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Sir, before we get to your job growth and your expansion plans, let's talk about that number that came out today. As we've been reporting all morning, the U.S. lost more jobs than forecast last month. That unemployment rate still holding steady at about 9.6%. America's jobless rate has been at 9.5% or higher for 14 straight months. That's the longest stretch since the Great Depression. How do we dig our way out of this?
What we're finding, and what the economists at Deloitte Research have told me, is that job recovery always lags following a recession. But what's different this time is some of the job losses were permanent rather than temporary, and it takes longer to replace those and to complete the retraining process.
At that point, then, that would explain this lack of pace in hiring?
It'll always lag because there's excess capacity in the system, and so you get revenue moving, and you just simply allow revenue per employee to grow before you expand your payroll. But the permanent job losses just simply are making it longer this time.
You know, it reminds me, because I recalled several years ago during the Reagan administration, and President Reagan, I was in Pennsylvania at the time, and President Reagan went to see Governor Thornburg at the time, and he said, now is the time where we have to retool our people. We have to retool our workforce. He said jobs in the steel industry were gone, and they're probably not coming back, so we have to educate you to take over the jobs of the latter part of the 20th century and beyond. Do we find ourselves in a similar situation now where we have to re-educate our workforce?
I think that's a very good analogy. Definitely some industries have been reset, and that level of employment is not going to come back. And some of those workers need to be retrained so that they can reinvent themselves and be redeployed in those industries that in fact will be growing and will enjoy expansion of their payrolls.
Yeah, as President Obama mentioned, he did say, he tried to put a silver lining on this. He said there were signs of private sector job growth, but that came mostly in temps and in food services sector. I got a note from Michael Ferroli of J.P. Morgan, and he pointed out those industries aren't usually considered high quality employment. Are we getting close to a point now where some of the jobs that are on the horizon right now are going to be low-paying jobs?
Well, I just haven't looked at the data that fine to be able to put that fine a point on it. But I think the fact that private sector payrolls are expanding definitely is what we're seeing at Deloitte, because we're confident that a sustained recovery has begun, even though at a slower growth rate than we might want. And that's why we've moved our hiring expectations back to pre-recession levels, and I feel good about that.
Even in this economic climate, you're sensing not short-term, you're looking long-term. Is that a risk for you to say, you know what, let's get them back to pre-recession levels? How do you do that?
Well, the recovery is uneven, and when you look across various industries, you're not seeing the same kind of performance. We see strong corporate profits and companies working to try to continue to improve their performance. They look to professional services firms to assist them, and change creates opportunity for a professional services firm. Our first quarter, we enjoyed 8% growth.
Speaking of change, as I mentioned at the top, you plan on hiring 250,000 people over the next 5 years. That's 50,000 people a year. How are you going to do that?
On campus and also with experienced hires. The professional services business has, as part of its fundamental business model, turnover is part of that. So we have normal retirements, we have normal people who just simply pursue a career elsewhere, and we have a high-performance culture. But on campus, there are many talented professionals coming off those campuses looking for a great place to launch a career. And we were delighted that Business Week labeled Deloitte as the #1 place to launch a career last year. We are popular on campus, and we can capture outstanding talent to have them begin their career in professional services.
You recently announced that Deloitte's the largest private professional services firm worldwide, revenues nearing $27 billion. How did you accomplish that in this environment?
It's all about sustaining your commitment to your vision. We want to be the standard of excellence, the first choice of the most sought-after talent and clients. And in professional services, if you take care of your clients, and if you take care of your people, and you take care of your brand, growth will take care of itself.
Mr. Quigley, in about 15 seconds, IMF, World Bank officials meeting this weekend. What do they need to tell folks?
We just need to restore confidence, and once we get confidence back in the system, we're going to see demand return, and then we'll see sustained growth and that job growth we're all anxious to see.